Trump and Ben Carson are breaking away from the GOP pack, if you believe the polls. So with people so fed up, do outsiders like these guys have a legitimate chance to snatch up the nomination? Then, if Joe Biden decides to run, does the president choose sides between Hillary and his own Veep? Things could get very dicey in the White House. And also, the president, he's up in Alaska right now to highlight the global warming problem. He's also changing Mount McKinley's name to Denali to honor their indigenous people. Both moves are getting some folks very upset. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Richard French. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to start with Donald Trump's latest outrageous comments. Seems like every day we've got a new one. Now, he's going after Hillary Clinton by going after her top advisor, Huma Abedin, and of course, by connection, her husband, Anthony Weiner.
So Huma now is one of the people that it all sort of came through Huma. Who is Huma married to? One of the great sleazebags of our time. Anthony Weiner. Did you know that? She's married to Anthony Weiner. You know, the little bing, 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 bum, bum. I love you very much. So, now think of it. So, Huma is getting classified secrets. She's married to Anthony Weiner, who's a perv. No, he is. He is.
Screams presidential. Trump being Trump, and voters, they're eating it up. Some new numbers from Quinnipiac could explain why. Nearly 3/4 of Republicans polled say that they prefer a D.C. outsider. Trump is, of course, an outsider, and so, for that matter, is Dr. Ben Carson. And those two guys are running 1 and 2 in the latest Iowa poll, and they're also the top 2 in most national polls. It is clear that voters are angry. Few debate that. And it's looking like maybe people are rebelling against what many thought was the inevitability of a Hillary Clinton-Jeb Bush contest. Well, let's bring in our panel. Nan Hayworth is a former Republican congresswoman from New York. She's also state co-chair for the Carly Fiorina campaign, and Dominic Carter, political journalist and author, and also former GOP Congressman Chris Shays from the great state of Connecticut, who's also attached to the Kasich campaign, and Andrew Whitman, our senior political correspondent. All right, we'll get to the Democrats next segment, so don't worry, there's an equal chance. But let's start with your own party here. Chris, I'll start with you in that. What do those numbers, but what do the numbers tell you? Because when you dive further into it, they have a pox on Republican leadership too. When polled about Boehner and McConnell and the rest, I mean, overwhelmingly they're against it. When you see these two guys, Carson and Trump, 1 and 2 by healthy margins in Iowa. They do well in New Hampshire. Nationally, they're being polled, and they're doing really well. I should say both Fiorina and also Kasich are doing better in the numbers. I'm not marginalizing, but still, those two guys clearly are 1 and 2. What does that tell you?
It tells you the obvious. Our country leaders have failed for the last 15 plus years, and they're kind of giving up on them. The sad thing is our country's governors are doing well, and some of our country's mayors are doing well. They're making the system work. They're tough. And so I hope in the end people will kind of settle down and say, we need someone who is a former governor or a former businesswoman.
But due respect, they have their choice of some governors in there. They can look at the Texas governor, they can look at the Wisconsin governor, and Republicans are rejecting them in poll after poll. Yeah. Ben Carson, from my vantage point, did not acquit himself that well in the debate. I thought both of your candidates probably did 1 and 2. People can debate which ones, but I thought Fiorina and also Kasich made compelling arguments at least. But look at the two guys that are running away. Yeah. It's the ones who have the least connection whatsoever to Washington.
So, what month is it? It's still
We're
August.
almost September. Tomorrow's September.
But the first election's next year. So, it'll be interesting to see how well, Trump does then. But he's cashing in on people's anger, and it's just totally understandable.
Do you agree? Because you got to see it from the inside recently. You were there for the birth of the Tea Party when that evolved. Do you think Republicans have misread what the Tea Party was about? That they could be co-opted? Because it seems that there's a rebellion of sorts that we're seeing playing out in the primary process so far?
I think the theme in both 2010 so strongly and this year with the non-establishment candidates is anti-establishmentarianism, if you will. You know, the Republican voters are fed up, and not just Republican voters. We know that there are a lot of independents and Democrats who are looking very favorably at these non-establishment, non-political class candidates. They're fed up with inefficient, ineffective government, and not just that, but with political types who talk around the issues, who parse. Hillary Clinton is the most prominent exemplar of
How
that
about Jeb
kind
Bush,
of.
though?
But Jeb Bush doesn't parse. Governor Bush has a more a less forceful way of saying things. So along comes Donald Trump, and he trashes political correctness. He expresses the popular rage at the machine, if you will. And lo and behold, he's tops in the polls.
Okay, but let's look at Trump. And Andrew, should the grand old party be worried about him? Because seemingly week by week, he's picking a constituency and insulting it. And while it's fun to be, reality TV as we get in September right now, will there be long-term scars?
Well, first of all, you've got a candidate who should charge a cover and a minimum for attending his press conferences or his rallies, because that's what Trump is. He's comic relief, but he's getting a lot of traction, and that's a problem for Republicans and for the campaigns that you two are both supporting. It's this sort of anti-Washington, anti-political class has been stoked in a lot of ways by conservative radio, conservative media, and now those are coming home to roost to a certain degree. There's also a problem because the two last non-politicos that I can remember making a big splash on a national campaign level were Ross Perot and Dwight Eisenhower. Dwight Eisenhower was a national hero anyway from World War II. Yes, he was, but that was also half a generation or half a century ago, and that was
time for another one.
And that was coming out of the war, where everybody knew this person and agreed with this person to a certain degree. And Ross Perot never really advanced that far into the process. Might have derailed Bush's second election and gotten President Clinton elected. So the problem is that the Trumps, the Walkers, perhaps even the Fiorinas, are choking off the oxygen for the other candidates. The candidates, in this case, the one you're supporting, and to a certain degree, the one you're supporting. And it may be hard for your candidates to find voice in this crowd and with this noise that's coming their way.
But let's look at it this way. Donald Trump is, I want to hear Dominic, because I know you're jumping in, Dominic, in one second, but Donald Trump is getting a lot of attention for the entire Republican field because the 24 million watching that big debate, that was a Trump audience because he's a well-known quantity. So the others should capitalize on that
but
attention.
at what harm? I mean, look at what he has done. Latinos, 30 million Mexican rapists. John McCain, I don't care what you feel about him, the man served our country with honor, and for a guy who took 4 deferments to go and besmirch him the way he did, and apparently without any kind of consequences, then he goes after Megyn Kelly and after Fox News. Explain the logic of this one to me. Dom, somebody said to me, hey, easy with the Trump thing. Herman Cain was doing great too around the same time 4 years ago.
There's no comparison.
Why?
Herman Cain lasted for, I believe, under a week, and then he ran into some personal trouble.
No, but at this same time, in August 31st,
Herman Cain
4 years ago.
But Herman Cain literally lasted like that. And then his personal troubles popped up, the women issue popped up, and then he was gone, and that was the end of it. Donald Trump is not comic relief. Whether we like it or not, he is the real deal. Don't believe me anymore. Just look at the polls. The congressman is correct in that it is early. So that's the best thing that perhaps the Fiorina and the Kasich campaign has going, is that it's still early. It's still early. Richard, I'm telling you, when he goes after Senator McCain, I know both of you know him, to me, that was very calculated. He knows that there's a part of the base that does not like Senator McCain for whatever reason may be.
Yeah. But his war record was never
But
won.
we're not talking about his war record. We're talking about his politics. And, if you notice Trump and Sarah Palin, they're aligned together. And basically, she does it more in a subtle way, but basically in going after Senator McCain. So we can continue to sleep on Trump if we want to, but the Republicans do have the clock on their side for right now.
Because if the party begins to follow Trump, as they are beginning to do, and you're starting to see candidates swinging at Trump and trying to follow his approach, it's going to take the entire
Cruz
party
trying
off.
to share stages
It's going
with
to take
him
the entire
Yeah.
party off the cliff.
But look at, I think it was today in Iowa, the latest poll has Ben Carson and Donald Trump
But what does that tell you?
neck and neck.
You watched
Well,
the same
again-
Ben Carson I did. I watched that debate, and the next day, with unanimity, maybe Jeb Bush got the worst marks, but Ben Carson was right behind him. The guy didn't say a thing.
But look at what that. Oh, fair enough. Ben
He came
Carson
off as a
is a
statesman,
neurosurgeon.
though. He came
He's-
off as a diplomat,
right.
and people like that.
He came off respectfully as a
Right.
gentle
Yes.
soul, a scholarly man,
Yes.
someone with
Yes.
deep sincerity. His
Yes.
entire life and career
He
say
did
that.
come off that
And
way.
so exactly,
opposite of-
exactly,
Yes.
Congressman
That's
Shea.
true.
The opposite. So here we've got the Trump and the anti-Trump lined up exactly evenly.
Well,
in
let
that
me
way.
say, if you just take those two guys, and the only thing they have
means
in common
Colley's gonna
is that
march
they're
in.
on the outside, there may be a bigger narrative coming out of this, and you guys may have seen this. Maureen Dowd did a piece, but Matthew Dowd, no relation, was quoted in it. And here's what he said in part. Do I think that Trump should be president? No, Dowd writes. Do I think that he can be the badly needed match that burns down the status quo meaning of the two-party system? Yes. Do I think that he could precipitate an advent of a real third party? Yes. So to you, Chris, I ask you two parts. Do you think he's right, and do you think that's good or bad for our political system?
I think he's right, and given the performance of the Republican Democratic Party, I think you need another voice.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it's both sides. We saw it in Washington.
I want to see a third party, a third person in the debate, presidential debate next September. Even though I support John Kasich.
But it's
But,
not
but is
Trump,
the
it?
risk, though, Andrew, about just somebody shooting spitballs and not, I mean, whatever you think, right or wrong, at the end of the day, you had two coherent, different platforms that were offered, okay? I don't care if it's 4 years ago, if it's 8 years ago, whatever. If all the guy is doing is just throwing firebombs out there without any policy, nobody thinks he's going to build a wall. Now people talk about building up on the Canada border. We're in the silly season. I get it. But if that's what the alternative is that really better the process?
This is what eventually has to do. People will get tired of just this. He will have to start coming up with policies. He'll have to tell people really what he'll do with taxes. He'll have to tell people really how he'll deal with immigration. He'll have to tell them really how he'll build a wall. Not the minute details, but and they're going to judge him on that. He can't keep doing what he's doing.
Trump's not going to be the guy whose flute everybody follows to form a third party in the country. I mean, again, people thought Perot might be the start of a third party, and he tried the Reform Party, and that went nowhere when Perot wasn't a part of it. People thought George Wallace might have been able to form a third party, and that fizzled out.
But there's a reason why it fizzled out, and this is real, something I can speak to. Republicans and Democrats, after Perot did as well as he did, remember Perot said, you know, when the government spends this much and it spends this much and it only raises this much, this is called the deficit. The deficits keep added up.
The flow charts, yep.
And he was educating people. He made fear in the part of Republicans and Democrats that they better deal with the deficit. And we balanced the budget for 4 years. He was the best thing going for us to be able to take some tough positions because the public demanded it. So I think really what will happen is if Trump starts to gain, Democrats and Republicans are both going to say, hey, where do we pick apart what he's doing?
He's crystallizing in
But where does that third
Coalitions.
party go? Does it go to the right of the GOP and the left of the Democrats, or does it go in the middle? And how do you organize momentum and enthusiasm for a moderate party? It's not,
We've
come
got-
on, everybody, let's get together
Well, you
and
know
be
what?
moderate.
But we have, again, if it's an anti-establishment trend, which I think is the dominant theme coming out of Donald Trump's rise. He is the, right now, he is the most vivid of these voices. But we've got a Ben Carson, we've got a Carly Fiorina, who are substantive, serious candidates who give, especially Carly, I would say, is
but don't-
remarkably gifted at articulating rational policy proposals and
But she's articulated.
these
John
solutions.
Kasich has the advantage that he did it in Ohio.
Kasich's awesome. He's a great governor. And I've been a fan of John Kasich's for a long time, too. But in an anti-establishment year, you're going to find that someone like a Carly Fiorina will start rising even more, I think, because she combines that sense of urgency with the articulate, serious policy approach that we really do
You
need.
do know that right now, though, she would be left out of the debate.
That's outrageous.
And
It is
that's
outrageous.
and how they're doing the math. CNN's a whole other issue as to which polls they're using and who's.
No, that's outrageous.
I mean, we'll get to that, I'm sure, in coming shows. But I'm curious. Do you think Whatever you think of Trump, and I know to be fair to you, you've said don't you guys marginalize him at your own risk, but every day it's something. Does America get tired of this at a certain point?
Richard, the American public doesn't care what us pundits say. I mean, to be honest with you, the American public is sick and tired of politics being politics. And that's not a Democratic label, that's not a Republican label.
But they also don't like being played the fool. And nobody
Okay.
thinks you're going to build a giant wall that the Mexicans are going to pay for themselves.
Why do you
and
say?
you're going to round them all up in a bunch of buses.
Why do you say nobody believes that? There are plenty of people that are jumping up and down for Donald Trump that believes, based on his record
me just do
of
math.
being a successful, and I know
23% of 30% of America. I mean, it's a fairly
gentlemen,
small slice.
gentlemen,
Dominic's right. Dominic's right. This is absolutely this is an anti-political class statement.
Let me
Okay,
add-
but
let
I
me
might
add
want to
one
say I want to colonize the moon tomorrow, but I can't.
But
He's
can-
not going to round up his number's 30 million, which I think he tripled in the real number, and he's going to have them all volunteer again on the buses,
But
and then all of a
please-
sudden he's going to build a magic wall. It's going to cost us
You know
hundreds of
what, you
billions
know
of
what the
dollars.
most popular person was in the early 1900s? It was the gentleman who said relativity. Einstein was the most popular person. Just think about it a second. People met him on the boat, tens of thousands of people when he came there. When he toured the country, he was the cause celeb. Who are the cause celeb today? The Kardashians. No, I'm serious.
I know, it's scary, but you're right.
That's what it is. It's a whole different mindset.
Richard,
pride
please,
and idiocy.
please keep in mind there's been a network television show called The Apprentice for many years that has told America that Donald Trump is an ultimate successful businessman. And you're discussing a third party. If you're Trump, I mean, why are we talking about third party? As of right now, and time is on Republicans' side, but as of right now, Richard, he's headed towards the nomination, and we can disagree all we want to. You can disagree all you want to. The facts say something totally different than shaking your head.
Says the guy who
But-
usually bemoans polls, but go on.
Okay, but the polls are pointing to exactly what I've been saying.
So now
Right,
they're
so
good.
it works in this case.
All right. Now we want to get you involved in our conversation. Head over to Facebook and Twitter and sound off on our question. Do you think America's ready for a third-party candidate? Forget about who it is for a moment. Do you think America really is ready? Because we talk a good game, but when it gets down to it, we haven't proven we are.
Can I throw one other thing out?
You sure can.
I think it'd be, if I was advising Trump, a huge mistake for him to say he's not going to run as a third-party candidate. Because
I think he's going to take your advice because he's stringing this thing out.
No, and the reason is that Republicans are going to be more fearful they'd be third party, so some are going to say maybe we better have him be part of the ticket. And frankly, if he's not part, he will be a third party force.
And by the way, it's going to be hard as any third-party candidate to get on all the ballots here. And
Yeah.
he's got no field game, at least at the moment. All right.
You can fund it though.
Now, we told you about people being angry with D.C. They're looking outside the Beltway at guys like Carson and Trump. But what about on the Democratic side? Is that anger also fueling support for guys like Bernie Sanders and, in the process, hurting one Hillary Clinton?